Hello, world. You're listening to episode 4 of the Phase Cancellation podcast. I am Mitchell Payne, also known as Ohm The Protector.
I'm Jason. I'm Jorts. And Happy New Year, if I may say so.
Yes, Happy New Year. It is now 2022. Only 200 years to go until we get 4 twos in a line. I'm so excited.
Let's go.
Let's go. I'll be around for that, probably. Do you think?
Maybe.
No? You never know what scientific invention is going to come out of left field.
I don't want to be around for that long. That's too much.
But you could really see the evolution of music. Anyway, so let's find out. It has been too long because I will take all the blame. I took a hilariously long time to finish uploading the last episode. So to getting to this point, it's been a little bit. So we've got some stuff to catch up on. So I'll start with let's start with you. What have you been working on? What toys are you playing with? What's your world looking like?
Well, as what normally comes with the end of the year, we had Thanksgiving in November. That's, this really cool holiday. You get to eat turkey and stuff. But right after Thanksgiving is Black Friday. And corresponding with Black Friday is generally a really, really big sale for music, technology, and plugins and stuff like that. Lots of manufacturers will put their stuff on sale, including Native Instruments. And I finally jumped on the deal and got Complete 13, I think it's 13 Ultimate, which is like 800 gigabytes of sound content. It's a bunch of synths and a bunch of effects and a bunch of sample libraries and just a ton of stuff. And I still haven't even scratched the surface yet. Aside from that, I've been working on, a couple tunes, just, sort of a couple remixes, some tunes for the next album, that sort of thing. Nothing too crazy. What about you?
Yeah, I always think about, because I'm always wondering, what is Jorts up to? Because my process, because of the way that I upload to YouTube, it's pretty quote unquote live. When I make something, I just boom, I upload it because I've done this whole moment thing where I'm not even I organize them into series when I'm uploading them to Spotify, just in sets of 10, but otherwise I'm just spitting out the moment whenever it comes. But you do the traditional band method where you hide in a dark corner for several years and then you come out with this massive album.
It's
anyway.
It's 1 year. It's not several years. But to be
right,
fair, yeah. On a macro scale, making music, I will work on a song or 2 or 3 very rapidly in the span of a few weeks, and then I will not work on music for a month, and then I'll again work on a cluster of a couple songs and then take another break. So I guess it might sort of be conducive to releasing singles, but at the same time I like the idea of albums and concept albums and cohesive themes and stuff, so shoot me.
No, I'm all about it. Yeah, I think it's it's another one of those interesting contrasts between us, because every one of my moments, something spicy or different in is happening. On moment 24, I just put a bit crusher on the master channel, and oh Lord, was that a mixing nightmare. I'm never doing that again. But yeah, I guess it's doing that in kind of the micro sense, but you like to really get in there. Because if you were to listen to all of my moments back to back, the mixing would be changing so erratically. Because I guess that's kind of one of the pros of doing an album, is that you can make sure that each song kind of sounds, with similar range, mixing and everything to one another. So it's not quite as jarring going from one to the next. But yeah, I've been kicking it on moments. My moment production, like speed has gone down because I'm spending more time on them. And I've been doing some other stuff on the side. Like a month ago, I released like an actual YouTube video where I just talked about my obsession with slowing down music using, gross beat or just purely stretching it or throwing a white noise convolver on there, which again, I know you and I talked about this in private, but you commented on that video and it got deleted. But I don't know, like, do you remember what you were saying? Because I'm really curious. Because, like, I know, like, the moment I started talking about a convolver, I'm like, Jorts is going to kill me because I'm going to butcher this explanation.
It might have had to do with
So
convolution. I honestly, I don't remember. That was a few months ago, I think, and
yeah.
I don't remember what I said. And it's not in my comment history, and it's not on the video. So Google, please. I don't know.
Yeah, YouTube is very cool. And it just deleted the comment. Like, I even set it to allow all comments, even like, so a bot could even come and like comment on a video if it wanted. Like, I don't know if it thought you were spam. It was like a well worded item. I don't know. Um, so yeah, anyway, I've been doing some other stuff. I've been streaming a little bit too. Even for this past Christmas, my brother Carlton got me one of those ring lights. So I've like stuck my webcam through there. And so now I have like better lighting and I'm able to position my webcam a little bit better. So I've been just kind of really experimenting on with like, what do I want to stream? Do I want to like record and then make like edited videos, or do I just want to do the old school let's play of just ship the whole thing with as little editing as possible? I don't know. I've been playing around with it, but I found streaming to actually be pretty enjoyable. Because personally, as a human being myself, I enjoy just like talking to myself. It's a thing that I've just always done throughout my entire life. Like if I have the house alone, like I'll just be speaking out loud to literally nobody. Like it's like thinking inside your head, but I'm doing it verbally. It's not like I'm having an actual conversation. It's very audible.
Yeah.
So doing that while you're sitting playing a video game by yourself is weird. Like, even if no one's listening, it's still just kind of like that you're just talking to no one. But if you're streaming, even if you're streaming to an audience of 0, like everyone encourages small streamers to just always be talking, so that if someone does jump in, they won't see a silent person slouched in their chair not saying anything. Like they'll see someone who's actively engaged. So it like gives me an excuse to narrate myself while I'm playing video games and like be a little bit more audible. And it actually makes the experience a little bit more fun. So I've been enjoying that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think streaming is a really cool medium. I haven't totally figured out how to make it work for like music or for my workflows quite yet. I got an idea recently which might work and is something that I kind of want to try. So like we briefly touched on this. My workflow for making music is so erratic and involves lots of frequent breaks to go, browse the internet or do other things. What I think would be cool instead of working on like full-length songs would be constricting oneself to like 8 bars or 16 bars and maybe even, doing something like viewer suggestions for genres or something. So, a viewer can come in and say, make 8 bars of uplifting trance. And then you just make an 8-bar loop and just add on to it, layers of stuff. And that way you kind of get to see a broad breadth of repertoire as far as what genres you could suggest or you could, put up there, while also, limiting each to no more than, 15 or 20 minutes or something, so that there's always kind of fresh content rolling down the line.
Yeah, that sounds cool because when I started the moments, I called them 60-minute moments because I wanted the idea of like a time constriction, so that I would like bum rush through it, and then I got and I got too into my music, and then I started taking like, 2 or 3 hours every single time, or, saving something and then coming back to it later instead of just doing it all at once. So having that constriction again, and the idea of genre constriction, I think is really interesting because my process, like I never start a project and think like, oh, I'm going to make this genre today. Like I'll open like either Serum or Synplant and just start playing with things until I'm like, oh, this sounds like it could be like a deep house instrument. And I can't even make deep house, but I'm like, let's see, what I can fit into this. And then I'll just start throwing drums, and then the genre kind of makes itself as I'm just kind of casually, mindlessly walking around this room of insanity. So actually having, yeah, someone say like, you've got 20 minutes to make future bass lo-fi edition, would like challenge me, but I think in a really fun way.
Yeah, you don't have the pain of dealing with like an entire song or arranging, stuff, but instead you have 8 bars or so that you can just really lock down and focus on. And since you know at the beginning that that's all you're going to work on, you can really make something good by just purely focusing on that. And I think another thing that might kind of be cool about it is that it's sort of like exercise in the sense that you're working on things that you might not normally work on, and it might lead to the creation of like presets or um defaults on commonly used plugins and stuff like that. Just like building racks or patchers or whatever, just building a toolkit that you can then carry on to, the next song or whatever.
Yeah, because there have definitely been like songs that I've made where, I mean, like I was talking about in my slowing down music video, like the first time that I found the slow triplet preset, like, and put that on a song, like that expanded the way that I make music tenfold, just knowing that that plugin existed. So that kind of rapid experimentation and like getting you out of your comfort zone, um, I think could lead to some pretty interesting things. So then what would that look like? Would that be like a back and forth thing with us, or just like a solo experience? I'm trying to think like, what are the logistics of that? Like, what is your vision of how it would actually work live?
Yeah, I kind of came up with the idea as just sort of a solo thing where, one person, myself or whatever, you just stream for, I don't know, an hour or two, and you just have it subdivided into these little 15-20 minute blocks where you're fixated upon one genre or one, 8 bar loop. And in between people can, make suggestions for genres and, how people, make up these crazy, silly genres and stuff like that. It could lead to
Right.
some fun. Um, I guess to do it with multiple people, you could just like have two people work on independent results at the same time and kind of compare results at the end. I'm not totally sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I've seen that done before. There was I don't know, it was some YouTube video that showed up. Thank you, YouTube algorithm that knows me so well or whatever. But yeah, they were like make you know, goth cyberpunk, but it's these like strange restrictions. And yeah, he was watching both streams, and he was going like back and forth watching like each person as they were making it. And yeah, and they had like 20 minutes, and then so that then the chat at the end kind of voted for who they thought was better. So yeah, there's something fun. And like even because I know like you have like a little bit more of like a little cult following. You have a little circle of people. I'm more on the down low. I'm on the deep underground. I can feel the thermal energy from the Earth's core. So I could even think of just write like a little Python script and just put a bunch of adjectives and then genres at the end, and then just like button to just give me a random selection, so that could at least like get me started kind of down that path. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an idea.
I tried having Python write music for me. I mean, literally all I did was give it a key, um, and then give it different note lengths, and just hit the randomize button a whole bunch of times, make some MIDI files, and then just drop them in. One of them was okay? Question mark. That was the extent of my technical experience. I feel like you could probably do something pretty impressive if you put your mind to it, seeing as you actually have a degree and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of the interesting stuff is happening with machine learning right now when it comes to like generative music and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, that's an entire discussion for a different day.
Yeah, yeah. So many things immediately popped into my brain, and I gotta push them away. Nope, 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 nope. 'Cause I think we've already even talked about it before. It's an interesting idea, but TLDR, the technology is not quite there yet.
Yeah, it's not completely convincing me that robots are going to be replacing musicians anytime soon.
No, they're doing pretty good at like graphical art, but music's just. I'm not trying to like compare music and graphical art, but they're just completely different creation processes. So computers are going to have to handle them differently. That's just a fact. Um, but so it's interesting. So recently, I released a video. I mean, I guess you could call it a song, but I mean, the title of the video is just "How many layers is too many layers," and it was me playing with kind of an orchestral sound bank, um, and just because it was arrayed, like the plugin is arrayed in such a way that it actually lets you select each instrument and where it would be in an orchestra. So I wanted to try and fit every single instrument into like a very small loop and just have it kind of layer up over time until it became like too much. But so seeing as you've gotten this recent contact library, like what are your plans? Because I think we've talked a little bit. Like I have heard you work on some or like kind of orchestra music before. I think you said it was like kind of like Final Fantasy boss fight esque or something, but it was absolutely incredible. And I will continue to call you out on it until you release it somewhere in the world because absolutely amazing. So I'm really curious, what are your plans to do with this new contact library?
Yeah, so Complete count came with a lot of stuff. Like a lot of the contact libraries are things like individual instruments like guitars, basses, organs, pianos. There's like 4 or 5 pianos just in contact. 4 or 5 different pianos. Who needs 4 or 5 pianos? Like uh unless you understand the nuance like between a grand and an upright, which inside a mix you might not be able to hear the difference, but whatever. You got some options. So yeah, a lot of the stuff that comes with that is individual instruments. There's also a lot of ensembles, things like symphonic string ensembles and brass ensembles, woodwinds and percussion and that sort of thing. There's also a lot of kind of purpose-built cinematic instruments, things like stray light or mallet flux are kind of um, sort of a blend of synthesized and sampled that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
build towards like you know uh kind of modern film production soundtracks like Hans Zimmer sort of stuff, like lots of big swells and like risers and like granular pads and stuff like that, just all kinds of material to play with. So I'm not totally sure where that's going to go yet. Cuz a lot of that stuff is kind of like purpose built for like indie film score sort of things, but a lot of the symphonic libraries and sort of the more traditional, orchestral instruments. Those will definitely see some use. And I use stuff like that in my electronic music too from time to time. But yeah, what you were mentioning as far as like, fully orchestral, like, video game soundtrack sort of stuff. I don't know. We'll see what the future holds.
Yeah, because it's been a strange process for me because growing up, once I learned that I did like electronic music, because of course it started out with me making fun of electronic music because that's what my brother was doing, and I hadn't really listened to it, and so once I did, I was like, "Oh, wait, I actually like this." And then I realized, hey, I could make it myself, and not need to know how to play a piano like an absolute grandmaster. And that kind of started me down this whole path in the first place. But like more recently, like the more that I'm watching films, like, I mean, especially kind of more modern ones, I suppose, like I'm listening to the soundtracks more and more. And like, when an emotional scene is happening, I kind of think to myself, like, this, a lot of the like, the crying that you want to do, a lot of that wouldn't be there if it wasn't for this incredible music that's backing it up. And people aren't supposed to pay attention to it. It's supposed to just kind of happen to them. And I've always loved that idea of playing with emotions and music. So I've started, building this playlist. I'm thinking I have one of my favorites. Oh gosh, the main theme for The Revenant, the one where Leonardo DiCaprio gets mauled by a bear, is so gorgeous and so simple. And I don't know, it's like I want to start recreating that. Maybe if I can find some way to like, yeah, make like hybrid orchestral electronic music, it'd be really interesting. But they're just such different production processes. Cause like I didn't really want to mix anything when I was working on my little orchestral thing. Like I wanted to like start pushing up the compressor, like as I always do. But it felt like the wrong way to mix it because the more artificially boosted you make the instruments, the less authentic it sounds. And that's, I don't want to say the whole point, but that's definitely a part of at least traditional orchestra music is that you don't slap sausage fattener on the end of it.
It can be a tough habit to break. But yeah, I mean, you still can compress, orchestral instruments. You just need to be you need to take a very gentle approach. And things like EQs are really what you want to be applying to orchestral instruments. And where, with synths, you might want to EQ gently and compress heavily. With orchestral instruments, you want to EQ a little more heavily and compress a little more gently because you want to pull things out of the instruments. You want the brass to pop, you want the strings to have that air. You need to
Mhm.
you need to kind of extract those out with EQ as opposed to with a synth. You're trying to tame a harsh peak around 3000 hertz, or you're trying to get rid of the mud in the low end. It's a different approach, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little minor tangential story, but I was on a cruise ship recently and they had people playing live music occasionally in this kind of like lobby area. And there was like a trio of violinists and they were incredibly skilled. They were doing a fantastic job. And like I really enjoyed listening to it, but at the same time, like my musician's ear was like dying because of, I don't know if it was just purely the instruments, because it seemed like some of them were like electronic, like MIDI violins, so to speak. Because I know those exist, but I just wasn't 100% sure if that's what they were doing or not, because I was pretty far away. Um, but like all I was thinking the whole time was like, man, if I could just mix this part, like this piercing 3000 hertz range is absolutely killing me right now, and I just bring that down. Like that's such a weird balance. Like listening to, like you're saying, like you want certain instruments to pop, but maybe that's not how it would be if you went to an actual orchestral theater. Like, how do they make their trumpets pop? I don't know.
Well,
I don't know. I'm asking too big of questions.
It's a legitimate question. How do you EQ the real world? And the answer to that is space. You know, if you're hearing a harsh, something harsh from violins, it's probably the room. It's probably a room resonance. So that's why you see all these theaters and concert halls that are designed in this crazy way with all this wood paneling and sound dampening all over the place. And there's no parallel walls.
Right.
And the stage is set up kind of in a trapezoidal fashion with wooden shells because wood resonates really well. And that the whole acoustics design of things like concert halls, that's how you quote EQ, the real world.
Whoever has the title of like musical architect when building those halls, I hope they get paid a lot, because that sounds extremely stressful. Because you don't really know how it sounds until you're done building the thing. Unless you have some way of like simulating it with some fancy, I don't know. But anyway, before we started, you were talking a little bit because it's the new year. You had some kind of ideas about how you were approaching your mixing process. Kind of curious on what you were thinking about that.
Yeah, so I was talking about like in December, I kind of threw out my old like mixing mastering chain cuz it sucks. From like 2013, 2014 up until, 2017, 2018, 2019 maybe, electronic music was just sausage and people would just compress the heck out of it, and that's just how it sounded. And then people were like, "Oh wait, that's really dumb." And magically, electronic musicians of all sorts just suddenly became aware of the LUFS scale, the loudness units full scale means of measuring audio. And it's not quite like RMS, but it has to do with measuring different frequency bands over time. And what's happened in the last few years is different music streaming services and like YouTube and stuff like that have started adjusting the levels of content which is uploaded to their platforms based on a particular LUFS value. It differs, between services, but the crux of the idea is that if you smush your song to like -3 LUFS, then if you're uploading to Spotify is, I don't know, let's say -10 LUFS for sake of argument, that if some other song, say a classical piece or something, is mixed to like -14 LUFS, then that is going to get boosted by 4 LUFS, and your song, which is mixed to -3, is going to get attenuated by 7 LUFS. So what happens is they're going to sound roughly the same loudness, but your song is going to have a lot less dynamic range because it was, squeezed. So it becomes a trade-off of, well, it's not a trade-off anymore. Before it was a trade-off of dynamic range versus, your song being louder on streaming services. But now that streaming services have gotten wise, there's not really much to be gained by squeezing your songs.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because that's still like ingrained into my brain, that squeezing. I mean, especially if I'm making something like my super angry dubstep. Like, it's on Spotify. Like, if you want an example, whoever's listening, like, go to my Spotify, listen to number 19, It's Supposed to Hurt. That song, when I made it, I just had my Maximus on my master. That was it. And I just cranked the gain and then put the soft saturation on. So it wasn't technically clipping, but it was, I mean, the whole thing is like writing just 0 dB the entire time. And then go listen to like a well-produced, more popular musician, and just listen to the incredible like volume difference. Like you'll feel the need to like turn your computer or your phone's volume up or down when jumping between both of them because of how absolutely damaging I blasted that music. But I almost don't know, like, how do you do dynamic range and aggressive dubstep at the same time and have it not break the LUFS system? That's a question I genuinely don't know the answer to because I'm bad at mixing.
Well, I would say the most important thing is to have some sort of persistent metering. You want to be able to see as you're working on a song how loud it is. And I found a solution by suggestion from James Egbert. It's called mini meters, and it's a persistent standalone application. I think it's made by Direct, like the Monster Cat guy. But I've just got that sort of situated on my side computer monitor, and it has. I'm just using the demo version. I'm planning on buying the full version at some point, but the demo version has a LUFS meter, and it also has a not a spectrogram. What's the other one? A scope, an oscilloscope, and I have a sound card that lets me do this. I just have it set to listen to the loop back output or input on my sound card, which basically captures everything that is going out the main outputs. So when I'm working in, and it's independent of driver because it's captured at the hardware level. It doesn't listen to ACO or Windows MMA. It just listens to the actual hardware output. So that's kind of cool. So it means that when I'm in Ableton Live and I'm working on a track and I've just got the song playing, I can look over at the meter and see how loud it's hitting. And part of the benefit there is you can think in advance about how loud certain elements of the song need to be. You can think a little bit more about like balance between different frequency ranges, but overall, yeah, I think metering is important. And there's free VST options out there as well. I just like having something persistent where I can just look over and it's there, and I don't have to worry about opening a plugin window.
Yeah, that's interesting because I mean this is kind of a notorious problem for me. I mean, you always like I haven't admitted it live, but I mean, you talk about oh, I was mixing this towards negative something something, and oh maybe I decided to maybe the podcast recording I just set it to negative such and such just in case, but you can normalize it if you want. And I mean, I'm in like basically entirely self-taught, so that way of thinking has basically never occurred to me. Like my whole thinking process is there's negative infinity dB and then there's 0 dB. And my goal is to just hit 0 dB. That's how my brain thinks. And I know that's troublesome, but I am not sure how to fix it.
Yeah, so you can still hit 0 dB. Your lizard brain can still, be satisfied with the knowledge that you're peaking at 0 dB. But that's the trick is right there. You have to peak at 0 dB. You don't want to ride, 0 dB loudness units full scale. If you want to keep that down low, you need to be careful about your compression because you want your loudness units to be kind of low, but you can still peak up high. And the way that you do that is you can sneak a few transients through. And that would be things like drum hits and maybe, plucky synths and that sort of thing. You can let those through with like a bigger attack on your compressor, maybe 50 milliseconds to 100 milliseconds, that sort of range. That'll sort of let little snappy things through, but you still want it to kind of clamp down and keep things in the minus, well, whatever you want. I've been targeting -9 LUFS personally.
Hmm.
And your next question is probably how do I do that?
I mean, a little bit of that, but I mean, because I know it's my problem isn't just like, oh, the master output has a certain problem. It's like frequency related issues. Like, listening back to a ton of my music, when I'm listening to it on my computer headphones, I'm like, yeah, this sounds perfect. But when I listen to it in a car, I'm like, why is my sub bass so loud? Because, when we buy our fancy producer headphones, and I keep seeing my headphones everywhere. It's like every producer's using these or whatever. But like they're supposed to quote unquote be generally balanced. But I, as a human being, crave an immense amount of sub bass. That is something that pleases me. And as I mentioned way long ago in another episode, when I was using my neurophones, like I realized that every human being's ears are drastically different. So it could be that the way that my ears are built is that I'm pushing frequencies harder than I should be pushing them. So it's not just, oh, what's my total master output? I have to also fix my frequency distribution problem. And I know the answer that everyone uses is reference tracks. And I don't know, maybe I'm fussy. I don't want to do that.
Well, there's hardly any fuss to it. You just, whenever you render a song out to an MP3 or whatever, you drag it into your media player of choice, Fubar or Windows Media, whatever. And then you just drag your reference track into the same playlist. And then you just listen to them back to back. Maybe you adjust the volume a little bit between them to sort of get them in the same loudness range. And then you can listen for, bass content or for frequency range or that sort of thing. I know that's kind of I don't know, maybe that's the academically correct answer because everyone talks about reference tracks. Half of this can also be like another plug for Minimeters. Minimeters oscilloscope also has like a color coding function where at any given moment in the waveform, it'll color code that like section of the waveform based on what frequency range is loudest. And it'll sort of like mix the colors based on that. So like red, pure deep red is like sub bass, and then orange, yellow, green, through the rainbow, where like purple is, very high frequency content. So something that I've started doing with this metering tool is I will listen to reference tracks and I will look at how they look on the oscilloscope. And so like during the drop, I can look at it and let's say it's kind of like a pinkish orange, right? Then I can just try and mimic that pinkish orange when I'm playing my own track in Ableton Live, right? Just adjust the sub bass balance to, to whatever value it is that kind of gets it to look like the other song. That works if you're a more visual person.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of my, parametric EQ8 in FL Studio is very visual. The Maximus plugin, which is basically where I've learned everything about compression that I know, is very graphical. I mean, you can see like the lines, like as right now the plugin is boosting this or it's dropping this. Like when I've like opened other compressors and there's just 4 knobs, like I'm completely lost. Like I have no idea what's going on. Like having that extra visual component is extremely helpful. It just feels like there's such a tough balance between half of, music advice is if it sounds good to you, then do it. But at the same time, we're struggling with this problem of it might sound good to you, but it's going to sound bad to everyone else or on another listening system. Like I'm thinking like a solution, and I think I've even seen this marketed somewhere. There was I know there's some fancy VST out there that like has this giant range of like speakers and headphones. and they've done some fancy schmancy whatever to try and like realign them back to normal. I'm thinking like, should I go into my like Windows equalizer and just like boost up my bass so that when I'm making music, I compensate less? Like that feels so wrong. That feels like something that I should never do. That feels like an absolute no-no. But it kind of makes sense because I don't want to be making a song and hate listening to it while knowing the fact that I'm making it the correct way. Like that just doesn't feel right, you know? Maybe I'm just meant to suffer. Maybe there is no good solution.
I've always been of the opinion that probably the most important part of mixing is rendering your tracks. Put it on your phone, listen with earbuds, listen with Bluetooth headphones, put it in your car, put it on whatever stereo you've got, put it on your home theater 5.1 surround sound system, put it on, listen to it on everything that you can, and listen to it in the context of like a playlist of like music. And the more you listen to it on more things, the better you will get at mixing overall, because it's, you can't know unless you're very experienced or very lucky, what the right mixing parameters are going to be the first time around. I think it's important to go and listen to it on a lot of systems. Like when I was just starting out with releasing music for real, I drove this 2002 pickup truck which had oval shaped speakers. The speaker cones were made of paper, and the plastic in the door would like rumble when there was too much low end. I've always said, if you can make your song sound good on a crappy stock car stereo, it'll sound good on anything.
Yeah, fair enough. Because that was what I picked that up from like I remember there was a sub bass tutorial from Mr. Bill. God bless him. He's such a cool dude, and I love his music. But he was talking about, with your sub bass, not having it just be like a single sine wave, adding extra harmonics to it so that if you're listening to it on a phone, your phone can't produce that lowest pure sub bass tone, but it might still be able to pick up the harmonic, and then your brain automatically does a little bit of trickery and says, oh, I found the harmonic, and I can almost pretend to hear what the sub bass is. Yeah, so I think I just need to break the habit of thinking, all right, the song sounds good to me, exporting it and immediately uploading it to YouTube. I have to stop. I got to put it on my phone. I got to listen to it with earbuds. I got to compare it to other music. I mean, growth mindset. If that's what you got to do, that's what you got to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a bit tangential. So you said you've kind of broken down your mixing process, or your master chain. So what does your new chain look like? What is your new approach?
Yeah, so I rebuilt it with entirely free plugins, so you can follow along at home if you're so inclined. When I think of mixing and mastering, I'm thinking of more or less 3 or 4 kind of main problems that need to be solved. The first problem is dealing with problem frequencies. The second problem is dealing with peaks at different problem frequencies, which you might call resonances. Another problem that invariably needs to be solved is dynamic range, and messing with dynamic range, expansion, compression, whatever. And the last problem is to prevent clipping, and that's that's important.
Yeah, that's like step 1 for mastering is don't clip.
Or at least to do clipping in a controlled way.
Yeah.
If you want to do like soft saturation or that sort of thing. So the approach that I've generally been taking recently is I'll start with just a normal EQ, and I'll listen to the track and I'll pick out, a couple of problem frequencies, the usual suspects are 3 to 4 kilohertz, which is kind of where like harshness lives. 250 to 300 hertz is usually where muddiness lives. And then somewhere in the range of 8 to 10,000 hertz, that's where sibilance is. There's a few different problem frequencies. Mostly that's just, doing EQ sweeps and kind of finding where things are, ooh, that's a little annoying, and just
Right.
doing very gentle cuts. So that kind of, solves a little bit of the first problem of dealing with problem frequencies. The second step in my chain is to do some dynamic reduction. And what I use is multiband dynamics, which is a built-in plugin in Ableton Live, but any multiband compressor will do. Um, and I compress low, mids, and highs independently. Not super hard. I just kind of, try to bring them to maybe 2 or 3 or 4 decibels of peak reduction. It's really just about kind of um, taming the area around peaks. So um, the envelopes will be, kind of snappy for highs, a little less so for mids, and then kind of a little slower for the lows. And that's really just about making sure that, for instance, my kick and my sub are playing nicely together in the sort of
Right.
below, 150 hertz range, and that all of the synths, that are kind of living in the mids are glued together and sound cohesive, and ditto for the highs. So at that point, the dynamic range is reduced a bit. Things are kind of glued together. Glue is, sort of that mixing term which gets tossed around a lot, but yeah, it's basically compressing things kind of gently, our RMS compression maybe, soft knees, just sort of getting things to sort of squish together just a little bit. So after that point, I use a dynamic EQ, and this is the first, kind of free third party plugin. I use a plugin called Nova by TDR. It's a dynamic EQ, which, if you're not familiar, it's sort of kind of similar to a multiband compressor, but different. A multiband compressor is a device which takes audio input, splits it into different bands, and then compresses each band individually according to a threshold and an envelope. A dynamic EQ is a device which, in concept, does not really do any splitting based on frequency content, but allows you to equalize things, but then lets you set thresholds based on just the bell curves that you've set in the EQ. So, for example, with a normal parametric EQ, Fruity EQ2 or EQ8 in Ableton, I might find that there's something kind of around 2 to 3 kilohertz, which isn't always there, but every once in a while there gets to be a little too much in that range, right? And I could just, apply a cut there, and well, that would solve the problem, but now we have less, less than we started out with on average. So what a dynamic EQ does, what you can think of it as being, is using a compressor's envelope to adjust the gain on that particular curve's gain. So what you can do is set a bell curve to 2 to 3 kilohertz. You can set the Q factor, the bandwidth, as you see fit. And then you can set a threshold, and basically what it'll do is turn the gain down when it hits the threshold. And you can set a ratio, and you can set an envelope. And it's not as it's a little more surgical than a multiband compressor. So that's why I say it's really good for taming resonances and maybe, transient issue frequencies without just cutting everything all the time. It's able to react to problem frequencies only when they appear and not touch the source material when they're not.
I'm totally not installing it right now in the middle of a podcast because
It's
I've been searching for something like this for a long time. And again, like, you know, I'm not an economically well off person. So
it's a really cool
um,
plugin and it's got really great documentation. The manual is fantastic.
yeah, because I have run into that exact problem so many times. I'm like, I love this instrument, but when it plays, you know, a particular note, then there's a frequency spike that drives me insane. But if I just put a hard cut on it with a basic equalizer, then I'm losing that extra flavor when that particular frequency or that particular note isn't in play. And so being able to dynamically, surgically, like you said, adjust that, um, I I've been waiting for so long. Thank you, Jorts. You're really changing the way that I do things. You're a real teacher. You don't know it, but it's happening. It's happening
Thank
live
you.
right now. Yeah.
Well, don't close your browser yet because there's one more plugin in the chain that's by TDR, and that is I think it's called Katelnikov. It's their
That's a name.
it's their mixing mastering compressor. And it's really cool because it has separate circuits for peak and RMS. So it kind of chooses a circuit with its own envelope based on what's coming into the compressor. It has a low frequency relaxation parameter where, like, if you've ever compressed something that's really bass heavy and, like, you know, whenever an 808 hits or something like that, it just, the compressor's like, oh shit, gotta clamp down on that. Because
Right.
because if you look at, you know, energy density in the spectra, the low end is like crazy high and then it just kind of goes
Right.
down, you know, the higher you go. You can actually basically gently high pass the detection the detection algorithm in the compressor, so it doesn't, you know, react so aggressively to low end, which is really nice. But yeah, overall, it's a very nice, you know, mastering compressor, sort of as an almost last thing on the mastering chain. And that is what does a lot of the heavy lifting of bringing things down to my target LUFS value. So, you know, setting the threshold and the ratio, uh, and the makeup gain to, you know, about where I want it to be.
And so where is that? That number that automatically comes to your mind that just popped in. Where do you want to be?
-9 is about where I'm kind of targeting these days.
Why?
Because to my ears, that's a place where like the music still has the character of electronic music. Like electronic music, I don't know. It can't just be me, but you want it to be a little squished, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that.
Um, you want it to be a little hard hitting, but -9 is kind of a spot where you can get that squished, hard hitting sound while also leaving plenty of room for transients on drums or snappy synths or bass lines and that sort of thing. So you have enough dynamic range to have, you know, to let your transients kind of breathe a little bit without getting clamped down right away.
Hmm. Interesting. Very interesting.
So the final plugin in the chain, the mechanism which basically deals with those transients that make it through the compressor is, you're gonna laugh, Camel Audio Camel Crusher.
Oh, I remember that one.
So Camel Crusher is like, oh my god. I stopped using it for like the longest time, and then I was like, looking at an old hard drive, and I found the DLL for the plugin, and I was like, oh, I'm taking that because its built-in compressor is one knob, and it's so good. I don't know how it works, but it's like it has the envelope tweaked just such that it'll let things snap and really pop but it gets loud, but it doesn't clip, you know?
Hmm.
So at its output, Camel Crusher has a 0 decibel brick wall limiter. So what I will
Okay.
usually do is I will turn off the compression unit. We don't need any more compression at this point. And I will turn on the distortion module. I won't boost the distortion. I'll just leave it on. And what that does
Hmm.
is anything that hits 0 decibels will clip through the soft clipper. So it won't be nearly as harsh as if it were just allowed to go to the output and hard clip. But
Right.
you still get the soft clipping versus limiting. It's a lot faster response. You don't have to deal with the release envelope, kind of clamping down on whatever comes right after the peak. And you still kind of preserve some of that loudness with clipping as opposed to with limiting. So that's it at that point. At that point, the dynamic range overall is compressed down to -9 LUFS by Kotelnikov. And then Camel Crusher deals with any errant transients which make it through and just makes sure that nothing beyond that point is getting above 0 decibels.
I'll have to try this. I'll have to see if I can copy this chain and see what it does. I mean, obviously there's going to be a tad of a learning curve, but
Yeah, give it a try. Let me know. I can maybe kind of explain how some things work. The dynamic EQ Nova is pretty intuitive. The mastering compressor is not. It's like we were talking about. It's not very visual, so it's not like Maximus. So
yeah, this the one I'm scared of. I'm looking at the picture of it and
yeah,
I'm intimidated.
you'll have to use your mind's eye a little bit. The metering on it is pretty good, but this is the sort of thing where having that persistent loudness meter, like mini meters, would really come in handy because that lets you set your gain on the output and your threshold based on where you want it to hit as far as LUFS.
Oh man, I don't even know what to say. I'm like speechless. I'm like, this is because I'm
Yeah,
like
you
I'm
got
like
some
slightly
homework to do.
traumatized because yeah, I mean I've been again my process has been the same for so long, but as what's the probably misquoted Albert Einstein definition of insanity? If I keep mixing the same way and it keeps turning out badly, maybe I should try something else. At least I've learned how to, switch my master to mono sometimes. That told me to literally never use a fruity stereo shaper ever again.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm a headphone user, so the more stereo, basically the better. Like I can listen to sub bass in stereo, and I think it's the bee's knees. Like I genuinely enjoy that. But if you're listening on, like a Alexa device or something in mono, you get, we're gonna say the name of the podcast, phase cancellation. Yeah. And so using time delay in order to create stereo has bit me more than a few times. So I've been trying to figure out kind of better ways to get better stereo width. For like the first time in my life a couple weeks ago, I routed one track to two different chains and I had one of them completely or at least mostly mono and it was cut from the mid-range down and the other one was cut from the mid-range up and that one was much more separated and I was able to like play with adding different effects, like don't put reverb on the one that's low, keep it a little bit more simple, but I can put all these like fresh pizzazzy, maybe a little bit of bit crushing on the higher ones. And that's just the terrifying thing about electronic music is there's so many options and you are the only one responsible for making all of the decisions.
I don't know if Fruity Parametric EQ has a mid-side mode, but that
I
might be
feel like it does.
that might be worth
but-
checking out. One thing that I've done a lot lately is which I was not doing a lot of before, which I'm really kicking myself over, is mid-side EQ. And understanding where different instruments sit in the mix, not only in the frequency domain, but also in, in the mid-side domain is very important and can let you do some cool things. Like, obviously, your sub is going to be dead center, right? It should only be in the mid channel and not in the side channel. Otherwise,
You
that would
don't
be
hard
very
left pan your sub bass?
ah every day, dude. So
Sorry, go on.
So yeah, so like you can take instruments which might be, clashing frequency wise. You can just like kind of bias one towards the middle and one towards the side. And then oh, wait, we don't have that frequency clash anymore. There's a lot you can do in that regard as well. And I just built a little simple audio rack which I can put on my master and I can listen to or process the mid and side channels separately. So you might want to roll off, some of the low end in the side channel. If it's a little rumbly around 200, 300 hertz, you can do that. Just sort of doing EQ separately between mid and side is something that you should look at.
Yeah, because I've seen that like phrase everywhere, and I just get intimidated. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. I'm not gonna touch it. Like, I could guess at what it is. I mean, kind of like as you were explaining it, I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right. But oh my gosh, effort is the bane of my existence. Also, I have a quick question. So I've been doing something recently, and it's a small thing, but I'm curious if it's like a healthy mixing thing or not. Um, so basically, again, with Maximus, everything is visual. So once I've kind of like 95% completed my song, I will look at. You can also see like the frequency spectrums with all the colors and the lights and everything. Um, and so you can basically just apply like a high pass to the low end. So I'm basically just watching like where my kick and my sub bass landing. And then I'm cutting it like just up until I would actually start cutting things that are audibly important. Because for some reason in the back of my mind, I feel like I'm losing a lot of headroom and dynamic range to frequencies that are so low that very few systems in the world could even play them. I don't know if that's true or not. Like, is that a myth? Is that something I should be worried
Oh,
about?
it's entirely possible. It's something that if you're working entirely in the box with like purely digital synths and effects, it's probably less likely. Um, things like DC offsets, basically. Like, if your entire waveform is not centered on zero, but it's centered on some other, non-zero constant value, that's what's called a DC offset. And those are bad because of all the reasons that you just said. Like, it's not an oscillation, so it's never going to play on any sound system. And all it does is limit your headroom. So you want to get rid of it. And basically, what a DC offset really is it's the limit of a you can think of it as the limit of a signal as its frequency approaches zero, because if you have a sine wave which is just moving really really slow and you bring its hertz, its frequency really really close to zero, it's going to be moving so slowly that if you zoom in it's going to look like it's just a constant value. So a DC offset is just an infinitely slow wave, if you really think about it that way. And what that means is you can get rid of it with filtering. All you need to do is high pass your master or your instrument or wherever at, anything above 0 hertz. And doing that, kind of up in the range of, 15, 20 is pretty common because your subs, unless you have subs which are hitting at like less than 30 hertz, which you probably shouldn't be doing. Like, just go
yeah,
up
no,
an
I'm usually
octave.
around like 80-ish. Like, yeah, 80 is like my soft point, I think.
Yeah, like I think G is about 50 hertz, so E is like 37 or something like that. And once you get much lower than that, like you're reaching frequencies which are too low for subs to really reproduce. So yeah, like Nova. the dynamic EQ plugin, it has built-in high pass and low pass filters. And I think they filter by default at like 15 hertz and like 30,000 hertz or something like that. So
Right.
yeah, it's not an uncommon thing to do. And yeah, you should be doing it.
Well, I've learned a lot. Viewers out there, I hope that you've learned a lot. If you ever need to pause the podcast and open up a wiki, by all means, go for it. But I got some new things to try, so hopefully the next time we all meet, we will have seen how our experiments go. I think that will about do it for Phase Cancellation Episode 4. I am Omen the Protector, also known as Mitchell Payne.
I am Jorts.
I love how yours is just so much more succinct. I feel so stupid when I'm just rambling out my entire thing.
It's a statement
Anyway.
of fact. I am Jorts.
Yep, I am Jorts. Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Thank you for listening.